What's up everybody, my name is Carl, and today I'm going to talk to you about what the skunk ape is. The skunk ape, or the swamp ape, is a cryptozoological creature, an ape-like being that is said to inhabit the forests and swamps of the southeastern areas of North America. The skunk ape is depicted as a being that's between 6 to 8 feet tall and has black fur with glowing red eyes, which is unusual for a primate as they tend to have a layer of tissue which is behind the retina that reflects light. You're probably wondering why it's called a skunk ape, and that's because, well, this cryptid stinks. The stench that comes from this being is described as a mixture of wet dog and rotting eggs. Yeah. Disgusting. The theory behind the stench could be due to the fact that the skunk ape resides in swamps, which of course produces methane. This in turn could be absorbed by the creature's fur. The cryptid has been known to move in wide and almost exaggerated strides, as well as communicating in grunts, growls, and a series of clicks. The skunk ape has allegedly been sighted in the southeastern parts of the United States, specifically in Texas, Georgia, Louisiana, but most notoriously in the Florida Everglades. The first known sightings are dated as far back as the 1960s, but most reports of the creature were made in the autumn of 1974 in Dade County, Florida. 26 years later, in the autumn of 2000, the police of Sarasota County, Florida, received an anonymous letter from a lady regarding the skunk ape. The letter contained 2 photographs of what the woman claimed was an escaped orangutan who had been stealing apples from a back porch for 3 nights. The photos were said to have been taken near the Myakka River, which cryptid enthusiasts then dubbed the creature as the Myakka skunk ape. The most infamous supposed sighting of the creature comes from Dave Sheely. He originally saw the cryptid in 1974 at the age of 10 after his father had come across a set of footprints left by the creature. He describes his encounter with him and his brother in awe as their mouths were agape as they watched the skunk ape disappear into the marsh of the Florida Everglades. It wasn't until July 2000 that Dave catches footage of the skunk ape. The footage is quite grainy and the creature is visible, but is sighted hundreds of feet away where it crosses through fields and palm trees towards the swamp. I'll link the video in the description below so that you can make your own assumptions. Now it's story time. I struggled to find a story on the skunk ape, but luckily I found one on Wattpad, written by Maz68224. So sit back, relax, and don't get scared. Skunk ape. The date is 6th of the 3rd, 2019. You and your 3 friends, Alex, Brad, and Sarah, all were heading out on a camping trip to the swamps of Florida. They'd all ask you to come along and you reluctantly agreed, since the whole outdoors thing just wasn't your style. But after some instances pestering, you relented. After 15 minutes into the drive to the camping spot, Alex asked, "Hey guys, what do you think about lighting some fireworks down at the site? You know, for fun." Brad immediately nodded and Sarah a bit as well after. "But isn't it too early?" you asked, earning a semi-annoyed groan from Brad and Sarah. After arriving at the campsite, you and Sarah watched as Brad and Alex argued amongst each other about who was sleeping in which tent and who had to do what. After a few minutes of arguing, all of the conflict was resolved and the 2 tents were set up. You then reached into your bag and pulled out your small camera. You then announced that you were heading out for a little bit to just take some pictures of the woods and animals that you saw. Your mother was an avid nature photographer and insisted that you got some photos for her. The group didn't seem to mind or be bothered by it, so off you went. As you wandered amongst the tall and looming trees and dense brush, you couldn't help but feel a strange presence. It wasn't much, but it was just there. But you chose to ignore it and continued taking photos of various flowers and birds you saw. You even managed to photograph an alligator, basking on a small spot of land in the water. Huh, I guess the swamps are beautiful at some points, you said. As you returned back to the camp, you sat down by Brad and stared into the fire. Sarah and Alex joined you two at the fire. Alex pulled out a bag of marshmallows and some poles, and you all began to roast marshmallows. So far this trip was pretty fun, you thought, until a sudden explosive sound shot out from your right, causing you to jump in fear. You look over and see Alex lighting some makeshift fireworks and tossing them away and laughing as they exploded. "Alex, save them for tonight," Brad shouted. Alex sighed and put them back in his pocket and sat back down. You checked your watch and realised that it was getting late. Your watch said it was 7 PM. You knew that you'd be made into a laughingstock if you went to bed early, so you forced yourself to stay awake. After about 1.5 hours, the sun had finally set, casting an ominous cover over the forest. Alex pulled out his fireworks and handed some to Brad and Sarah and you. After a few minutes, you were all lighting them up and throwing them into the air and watching as they exploded and lit up the sky. You chuckled briefly as the guys and Sarah squealed in delight. Once you guys were out, you all sat down and began chatting with each other. After a bit, Brad got up and announced that he had to go to the toilet and that he would be right back. As he stood up, you noticed his pistol in his holster on his waist and wondered how you hadn't noticed it before. As Brad left the campsite, you once again felt a disturbing sensation of being watched. You didn't know why, but it seemed like something was angry and was glaring at you from behind. A quick look behind you resulted in nothing. And then suddenly, the three of you were startled by a scream and 4 gunshots coming from the direction Brad had gone. "Brad? Brad, stop messing with us!" Alex shouted into the darkness of the woods, but to no response. Noticing how nervous Sarah was, Alex told her that Brad was an idiot who always pulled jokes on people, and he offered her to go into the tent to calm down. Sarah nodded and entered the tent. Alex then looked to you and said, "You know, you don't need to worry about it. Brad's an idiot." You could tell there was a tiny bit of worry in his voice. You nodded and went to the tent with Sarah and tried to comfort her. When you were gone, Brad said he saw a bear. You nodded to her and told her once again to just relax. Alex announced from outside that he was going to go to look for Brad, and after a little bit, he was gone. Silence fell upon the campsite for about 15 minutes. Sarah had somehow drifted off to sleep whilst you remained awake and were curious about what could have occurred, when all of a sudden, you heard something. A small grunt from about 15 yards away from the tent. You froze up and nervously looked towards the sound. All you could see was the flames of the fire, blocking view to whatever made the call. As you paid attention, you could hear what sounded like deep and heavy breathing from the opposite side of the fire. You remained still in fear, as suddenly whatever the figure was ran back into the forest as Alex returned. His face as pale in fear as he shook you and Sarah and immediately instructed for you to all get up and follow him. Sarah asked about Brad, but Alex ignored her and pulled her up and began running while dragging her with you following them. Alex clearly wanted to get to the truck, but upon making it there, you stared in absolute horror as a tree was impaling the truck's engine. "Crap!" screamed Alex as Sarah desperately asked him what was going on. Alex looked at her and said, "It's real." Sarah looked at him confused when suddenly, out of nowhere, 2 large dark figures pounced upon the two and began to maul and mutilate the 2 teens. Gripped by adrenaline and fear, you ran away. The horrific screams of Alex and Sarah echoed in your head as you ran blindly into the dark forest. Suddenly, you tripped over something and fell over. You were gripped by an ungodly odour as you looked around in fear. You heard something in front of you. You then pulled out your camera whilst trembling in fear and snapped a photo. The flash illuminated the monstrosity before you for just a brief second, allowing you to scream as the creature sprang upon you and tore you apart. 15 days later, after the disappearance of 3 kids in the local woods, a park rangee stumbled across a small den site. For something human and animal bones littered the ground, but what caught his eye was a small camera. He picked it up and cautiously pressed the button to see the most recent photos. What he saw made his skin go pale. What was on the little black box was this. And that was my take on the skunk ape, a famous cryptid in the Florida Everglades and certainly areas of southeast North America. A creature that basically is known for its awful stench rather than its savagery. I guess you'll be able to know when the skunk ape is nearby, or that you probably need a wash. Is the skunk ape real? Well, personally, I'm leaning towards it not existing. It could have existed, sure, but having done my research, I haven't really found any credible sources that state any recent sightings, or however much I'm able to pick up on this cryptid. Even the United States National Park Service believed the skunk ape to be a hoax, with some of the alleged sightings being dismissed as black bear sightings. Of course, I do leave this to you, the viewer, to decide if you think the skunk ape is real or indeed fake. So comment down below if you have any information regarding the skunk ape. Do you have any scary stories or perhaps even a real encounter to share? And also, what do you think, real or fake? Like and subscribe and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!